Hello, I'm Matt Galloway, and this is the Current Podcast. There is a place where some 16 million people go looking for advice in their everyday moral dilemmas. That place is known as AITA. Am I the last A stands for a-hole, a word that you will hear in full a few times coming up because, well, people want to know.
Am I the asshole for not wanting to meet my ex-husband's new girlfriend?
For not telling my roommates that I am the landlord?
For not inviting my parents to my wedding?
For giving my stay-at-home mom wife a written performance review with suggested areas needing improvement?
For refusing to give back the engagement ring to my ex-fiancé?
For naming my son after my father instead of my father-in-law?
For spreading my wife's ashes without inviting her sister?
Those are some of the questions asked on the Reddit forum AITA. Its popularity has grown exponentially in the years since it launched, and now that forum is the subject of scholarly study. Daniel Yudkin is leading the research. He's a social psychologist and visiting scholar at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. Daniel, good morning.
Good morning.
Can you tell us a bit more about this forum?
Yeah, this is a forum on the social media site Reddit. It's been operating since about 2013, and it is a place where users write in with everyday moral dilemmas. As you so lovely, your intro so vividly put, all these different dilemmas that people are facing with the people in their lives, wondering if they're in the wrong or not. And then other users have the opportunity to respond and provide their judgment and give them a feedback about whether they're doing the right or the wrong thing.
What is there to learn from a forum like this, do you think?
So I'm, as you said, I'm a social psychologist. I've been studying, my specialty is in morality, how people decide between right and wrong. I've been studying that for about 10 years. And I realized that so many of the experiments that we do tend to focus on situations that ask people to imagine things that would almost never happen in real life. So many of your listeners might have heard of the so-called trolley problem, where someone is asked to imagine that a trolley is hurtling down the tracks. It's going to kill 5 people unless they divert the trolley and sacrifice the life of one other person instead. Now, how many people have been in a trolley dilemma like that? Almost nobody. And so what we can learn from Am I the Asshole is to better understand how people are dealing with moral situations in their daily lives in ways that actually happen.
This is a hugely popular site, as I mentioned. Like some 16 million people are going looking for answers to their questions on this forum. How do you go about studying hundreds of thousands of posts to figure out some of the answers to those moral questions?
So my collaborators and I, after we basically scraped the website, which means basically we extracted many of these posts and comments, which are the responses to the posts, we were able to extract about 370,000 posts and 11 million comments. And then we used a series of methods, including artificial intelligence, to categorize the different posts to better understand the kinds of dilemmas that people are facing and to try to figure out patterns in what's going on and try to understand, try to map the dilemmas that people are facing in real life.
And so we heard some of those dilemmas in that introduction, but tell us more about some of the questions that people are posting on this forum.
It concerns everything from betraying someone's secret that they trusted in me, relational obligations. Am I the asshole for doing this thing that somebody else doesn't want me to do, or for not doing this thing that somebody else wants me to do? Things like lying or telling the truth, being honest with my partner about what I think about her new haircut. There's such a range of different dilemmas, things like fairness and judgmentalness. There's just such a wide variety of different things that people are experiencing that give us a better sense of these kinds of experiences that people are having.
How are we defining this? I mean, you could ask whether I'm an idiot for asking those sorts of questions, but this is going beyond being defined as an idiot, right?
Right. I mean, the way that I think about it is, am I the asshole is kind of just a colloquial way of wondering if I'm in the wrong. And in fact, actually, one of the questions that my collaborators had, and I was, the extent to which the question is really a reflection of this sort of deeper moral question of am I in the wrong or not. And so we actually conducted some follow-up studies. For the most part, is just a question of, am I doing the right or the wrong thing? It is a question of a little bit more having to do with someone's character, whether they're a good person or a bad person. But for the most part, it's just a question of sort of thumbs up, thumbs down. Is this right or wrong?
How quick are people to find others being in the wrong?
I would say that for the most part, people think that they're not the asshole about 2/3 of the time. And that could be for a couple of different reasons. One could be that really people are more, concerned or worried about things that actually aren't so bad from an external perspective. Another reason could be that they're presenting their side of the story and conveying themselves in a good light that makes them look better than they actually might be. Another could be that people are just, wanting to give people the benefit of the doubt. But yeah, the majority of the time, commenters say that what they're doing is okay.
How would you define kind of the moral compass on this forum?
So what we did, my collaborators and I, was we generated, using our artificial intelligence, we generated this taxonomy of 29 different dilemmas that people are facing. Everything from, as I said, lying to fairness violations to privacy violations and everything in between. And then we grouped those 29 dilemmas into 6 overarching categories. This is things having to do with harm and offense, honesty, fairness, social norms, private feelings like feeling jealous of my boyfriend for going out with his friends, and things like that. And so at the end of the day, we really kind of identified 6 different categories that really tend to capture these types of everyday dilemmas in a kind of in a simple and meaningful way.
And those categories tell us what about human behavior?
Well, one of the main things they tell us is that in contrast to what you might see and read in a philosophy book where people are, philosophers have tended to look for overarching principles that kind of tell us, that can give us a sense of, whether we're in the right or the wrong all the time. And what we find is that the vast majority of the time, what people are dealing with in their daily lives have to do with questions of relational obligation. So really the most commonly experienced moral dilemma has to do with questions of what I owe the people in my life, and how do I be a good person and treat them fairly and in the right way. So what do I owe my parents? How do I be a good son? How do I be a good parent? How can I be a good neighbor or a romantic partner? These types of questions about how to navigate the complex web of interpersonal relationships we have in our lives, those are the most frequent moral questions and challenges that people are facing every day.
I mean, one of them that comes up is, somebody asks if he was in the wrong for telling his fiancée that he didn't like her wedding dress.
Right. And what do you do in that situation? There's really a tension between 2 moral values there. Am I going to, prioritize my fiancé's feelings in this situation, or am I going to prioritize honesty? What does that mean for the rest of our relationship? Does she want me to tell her the truth, or does she want me to sugarcoat it in a way that makes her feel better? It probably depends on the timing, right? If it's the day before her wedding, maybe not a good time to tell her that you don't like her wedding dress. But, there's all these complex considerations that come in to the way that people have to deal with these differing values and principles that they're trying to adhere to.
I mean, these questions go well beyond Reddit, right? I mean, there's TikTok posts about them, there's Instagram posts about them, there's a podcast devoted to some of these questions as well. Why do you think people are drawn to weigh in on these sorts of moral questions?
I think that we all, there's something we see of ourselves in these posts. Who hasn't been in a situation where we're conflicted about what the right thing to do is, or we feel like we've upset or disappointed or offended somebody, and we're trying to figure out if what we did is really wrong or whether they're justified or unjustified in those feelings. So I think we find a sense of empathy in the posts that we're reading, and we see something of ourselves in those. And it gives us a sense of connection because it allows us to maybe feel less alone in these questions that we're grappling with in our own lives when we see other people are dealing with them too.
But do we really need a public forum to tell us whether we're acting like a jerk?
Well, I think so. I think that there's something that can be really cathartic about that. I think that oftentimes, if you feel isolated and alone in the types of questions that you're dealing with in your own life, it can be very isolating and potentially make the problem worse. You can turn and look at the other kinds of things and how other people have dealt with these problems and find that other people have dealt and grappled with similar problems, then maybe that can help give you some answers about how you yourself should deal with it. So I think that that's part of what is leading to the popularity of it. On the other hand, it's also just a fascinating opportunity to see what other people are dealing with. And so I think that's part of what makes it go viral too.
I just wonder whether, society's moral compass has changed at all. You would imagine that there was a point in time at which, if you were wondering whether you were in the wrong for telling your fiancé that you don't like their wedding dress, that people would understand that perhaps that's not a good thing to do, that you keep that to yourself, because you could cause harm in saying that. And maybe now we feel like you have to air that kind of stuff out. I just wonder whether our moral compass has changed over time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that probably the tension between honesty and saving someone's feelings, that's probably been around for a while. I don't necessarily think that that's a new one, but I do think that our moral compass has changed dramatically over the past decades, and if you even go back farther. I mean, it's been well documented that Western democracies have become increasingly secular over the past few decades. People used to be able to turn to religious leaders or religious scripture or sort of religious doctrine for guidance about how to navigate some of the core moral tensions that they face in their lives. And now for better or for worse, we have lost that sort of sense of, a lot of people have lost that sense of religious guidance. And so now I think people are turning to other means to try to find sources of direction in their lives. And this could be one way that people can form a community to make sense of moral questions that they might not otherwise be able to.
They also might be becoming more selfish.
They might be, although there's research suggesting that there's an illusion of moral decline. So every year we think that people are getting more and more selfish, but actually things are pretty much staying the same in terms of selfishness. Mm-hmm. It's just that there's a perception that people are becoming more selfish, that's not really borne out in the data.
People continue to post into this forum. What are the questions that you're hoping to ask next as you continue to look at these posts?
Well, so what my collaborators have done has really been focused so far on the content of the posts themselves. What are people posting about? What are people asking about? One thing we haven't gotten a chance to do yet is to look at the language around the comments. So people in the comments are providing feedback, and then they're justifying that feedback in a whole variety of ways. They say all is well that ends well, or the ends justify the means, or some of these types of moral rationalizations that people use to justify a moral judgment. And we have not had a chance yet to look into how people are thinking about responding to these dilemmas and how those judgments can help us better understand how people make moral decisions in the first place.
You ever been tempted to post a question on the forum itself?
I have, yes. I did one, and
what was the question that you asked?
It's a little too personal to share on the radio, but it was one of those ones where there's only a very small number of posts that where there is actually not consensus. People usually agree one way or the other, and the one that I posted, nobody could agree on. So that was an interesting experience for me.
That's really interesting. Also interesting that you just wouldn't share what the post was in itself, but that's fine. Daniel, thank you very much for this.
Thank you.
Daniel Yudkin is a social psychologist, visiting scholar at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania.